So I mentioned in the first talk that statistically the church is going a little bit backward in terms of our reach, and that one of the challenges for that is the lack of empowerment of people. You know, the sense that we don't have to be on mission because we're not, you know, ordained or on the sanctuary or religious sisters or something. And so the whole point of part one was to get each of us on mission and to make it really clear that all of us are called to the evangelising mission of the church, and this is a really simple way that you can enact that. Now, one of the hurdles then in enacting the mission is at some point you've got to bring someone who isn't yet Catholic to Mass. Now, this is a bit game, but how many of you would have brought someone who hasn't been to Mass before to a Mass in the last 5 years? A couple of hands here and there? Yeah, right. That's awesome. Now, when you do that, it changes the experience really significantly. And so this session is about what it means to be a missionary parish, because if you finally get them to Mass and the experience is really horrible, it can set back your evangelisation. Sometimes the parish can set back the evangelising experience. Now, I can say that because I'm not local here, so I don't know what happens in your parishes. That might be very, very good. But I know in some cases in Brisbane, people's experience of the parish is not always nourishing. Is that all right? You happy for me to say that? Cool, so let's look at growing as a missionary parish, and hopefully my little button here works. There we go. Now, mission is crucial because it sets the direction of absolutely every decision. Once mission is set, then all the other decisions flow. Little example, you know, I've got 5 children and we just recently moved houses about 3 weeks ago. And many of you would know that when you move house, it's like the worst thing you can possibly do. It's like, it's sort of a kind of purgatory. You're just shifting everything and picking up everything. There's just mess everywhere. And when you've got lots of kids, the more kids there are, the harder it is to move. Anyone with me, or is that just me? Like someone here love their moving house. But the point being, once you know, I'm in this house and I've got to be in that house by that date, then everything else in your world is oriented to that move. And so even when you're thinking about work, you're thinking you've got to get home, and when I get home, I've got to do this, 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 I've got to change the electricity bill, I've got to pack this room, I've got to pack that room, I've got to get the removalists to come on this day, I've got to get them to land on that day, I've got to make sure that the house is settled at the right time. Everything in the house, you know, I'm using this, do I need it in the next 2 weeks because we're moving in 2 weeks' time, so shall I just pack it or do I need to leave it out? Everything, all the decisions are aimed at that mission. Now, in any organisation, and especially the parish, if the parish knows what its mission is, then everything that it does can be ordered and oriented toward that mission. But if the parish doesn't know its mission, then it can just sort of meander on in a kind of mediocre and aimless way. I don't know if anyone else likes like horrible action films like The Terminator. I've got any Terminator fans here? I see that hand, my man. Oh, Ruth, you surprised me there. There you go, Ruth's into Terminator. In the third Terminator film, there's this classic little scene, and it reminds me of the Catholic Church, right? And this is why, right? There's the good Terminator, right, whose job is to save John Connor, and the bad Terminator has reconfigured his wiring, and so now he's become a bad Terminator, right? And John Connor doesn't know this, and so the Terminator that John thinks is the protecting one starts to go after him, and, you know, gets John Connor on the bonnet of his car, and he's about to kill him, you know. And John Connor says to this Terminator, "What is your mission? What is your mission?" And then the Terminator's CPU is going like this, and it's going to protect the life of John Connor. And it's like stopping, and it's going, "Well, you're about to fail your mission." And he's like, "Ugh." And then he turns his arm at the last moment. John Connor lives, right? Now, it's like the church is like the Terminator going, "What is your mission? I can't remember what my mission is," you know. It's like we're sitting there almost killing ourselves sometimes because we've forgotten what it is that we're called to do and be. And we've just gotten into this pattern of just, it's like the mass schedule is the only thing that matters in a church. You know, and like, you know, you suggest changing masses or reorientating or redistributing mass times and priests, and people go into conniptions. Like, people have heart attacks, you know. "I've been going to this mass for 47 years. You will not take it from me." What is your mission? Is your mission to keep having a mass for 15 people at 8 a.m? No, it is not. Is anyone with me, right? And so we forget our mission and we hold on to things that have got nothing to do with our mission. Your mission is not to have Mass at a particular time and place until there's no one left. Mass, yes, is the source and summit of the Catholic life, right? It's central to what we do. But just maintaining a time and a place is not the mission. Okay? And so we've got to be reminded what our mission is. Pope Francis says, I dream of a missionary option, a missionary impulse, capable of transforming everything we do. So the church's customs, its way of doing things, its Mass times and schedules, I'll just throw Mass in there, language and structures can be suitably channeled for the evangelisation of today's world. So why are we changing times and schedules? For evangelisation, rather than for her self-preservation. Here's the Pope going, what is your mission? The renewal of the structures demand the pastoral conversion can only be understood in this light. As part of an effort to make them more mission-oriented, to make ordinary pastoral activity on every level more inclusive and open, to inspire in pastoral work as a constant desire to go forth and in this way elicit positive response from all those whom Jesus summons to friendship with himself. As John Paul II once said to the bishops of Oceania, that's us, that's our group, all renewal in the church must have mission as its goal. If it is not to fall prey to a kind of ecclesial introversion. All right, powerful words from the Pope, powerful words, and one of the things that mean we've forgotten what we've done. The parish is not an outdated institution because it possesses great flexibility. It can assume different contours depending on openness, missionary creativity of the pastor and the community. While not being the only institution that evangelises, if a parish proves capable of self-renewal and constant adaptivity, it continues to be the church living in the midst of her homes as the sons and daughters, presumes that reality is in contact with the homes and lives of its people and does not become a useless structure out of touch with people or a self-absorbed group made up of a chosen few. Are we listening to the Pope? The parish is the presence of the church in a given territory, an environment of hearing God's word for growth in the Christian life, for dialogue, proclamation, charitable outreach, worship and celebration. And so here's the Pope saying, it cannot be a place of self-absorption. The parish is not about us. It's about everyone that's not there, right? It's about everyone living in that area that is your landmass of parish that is not in the pews, right? It's what we're here for. And so here's the thing, and the reason I'm so passionate about this is just, the Pope is saying it, and if we just keep doing what we've already done, we're just going to see the same decline, right? If we're not open to change, we can be sure that we're just going to see this decline, right? Because that's what our current milieu across the country is producing. So we've got to be open to change and to re-establish our mission and then orient everything that we're doing, as the Pope says, to become mission-oriented. Is that right? Now, for those that were not clear on what the mission is, well, I'll finish off on the Pope's from Evangelii Gaudium here. In all its activities, the parish encourages and trains its members to be evangelisers. It is a community of communities, a sanctuary where the thirsty come to drink. If we go to the very last sentence there, it's to make the parish completely mission-oriented. Be completely mission-oriented. Now, if you read your Archbishop's book, you'll see that he's very big on this and he's been writing letters about what it means to be completely mission-oriented. So what is our mission then? I'm going to just go through some key documents that'll be no surprise to anyone, hopefully. But what I find, and the reason I go over this, is because often people think that when we talk about evangelisation, that it's a Protestant thing or it's an evangelical thing or that somehow it's not Catholic. And as an ex-Protestant minister who spent 9 years as an ordained Protestant minister and now 10 years as Catholic, sometimes people think, oh no, you're just bringing the Protestant stuff into the Catholic Church. I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure Vatican II is pretty Catholic. I'm pretty sure the Pope's a Catholic. All right? So this is not the mission of the church according to some, radical convert. This is the church's own documents, all right? You're with me on that? So let's look at what they say. I won't read the whole of every quote, but I'll just pick a few things. So, divinely sent to the nations of the world to be unto them a universal sacrament of salvation, the church, driven by the inner necessity of her own Catholicity and obeying the mandate of her founder, strives ever to proclaim the gospel to all of humanity. That's what we're doing, right? Our mission, proclaim the gospel to all of humanity. Evangelium Conference. We wish to confirm once more the task of evangelizing all people constitutes the essential mission of the church. Terminator, what is your mission? What is your mission? It's evangelizing all people. Look at that second quote in bold. She exists in order to evangelize. That is to say, in order to preach and teach and to be a channel of the gift of grace. It keeps going to reconcile sinners with God and to perpetuate Christ's sacrifice in the Mass, which is the memorial of his death and glorious resurrection. So if our mission is to evangelize the world, is what's happening in your local parish or community mission-oriented? How are we evangelizing the people on the street of the same parish? What difference does the parish make to the local community? If your parish or your community closed tomorrow, who would notice? And if the only people that would notice are the people that already go along, then we're missing something about our mission. We've got to look outward. Redemptoris Missio, proclamation is the permanent priority of mission. The church cannot elude Christ's explicit mandate, nor deprive men and women of the good news about their being loved and saved by God. Evangelisation will always contain, as the foundation centre and at the same time the summit of its dynamism, a clear proclamation that in Christ salvation is offered. Now, one of the things that we see in the Catholic world is we've got these incredible agencies. We've got incredible, when I say incredible, I mean large and far-reaching. We've got schools and hospitals and centre cares and missions and Catholic cares. We've got all kinds of mission, and they're beautiful and powerful, and they do a lot of work in the common good. But the question is, are they evangelising? Are they contributing to the mission, or have they become simply Catholic-owned non-government organisations? And that's a really important question, because when our agencies lose their mission, then they really just become NGOs, right? What makes an agency Catholic is its contribution to the mission. Is that right? There's a beautiful paragraph in the end of your book that says that really clear. If I can grab it later, I'll read it. It's just so important, because we have this idea that being Catholic is just doing good stuff in the world, but so is Amnesty International, so is the Tasmanian government, so is the Australian government. Doing good things, right? Looking after poor people, government's on that. Government's got hospitals, government's got schools. How are our schools, our hospitals, our agencies different? What makes them Catholic? That's a little aside. Benedict says the proclamation of the gospel remains the primary service that the church owes to humanity, to offer the salvation of Christ to the people of our time who are in many ways humiliated and oppressed, and to orientate in a Christian way cultural, social and ethical transformations that are unfolding in the world. So, how can we become completely mission-oriented? I want to give 3 little insights, and again, they're relatively simple, but 3 things that we can do to make your local parish or your local community mission-oriented. Now, obviously, when I say mission-oriented, I mean the mission we've just talked about, the proclamation of the gospel, the evangelisation of the world, sharing Jesus with humanity, helping people to experience and encounter Jesus in the body, blood, soul and divinity of the Eucharist, right? So the most intimate encounter we can have with Christ is to receive the Eucharist. And so how do we get people into that kind of encounter? The first thing is to start with those in the pews. Are those that are already in our community evangelised, or are they only sacramentalised? And we need both. And what I mean by that is, and I've had people in my own local parish talk to me about this. Some of our older crew have come and said to me, Peter, when we were young, we just knew that if you didn't go to Mass, you were going to go to hell, or you'd committed a mortal sin, and so we just knew you had to go, right? Yeah. But we didn't know there was this like relationship thing. Like, what is that about, you know? And so we've been able to talk about what it means to encounter Jesus and to begin a personal relationship. And they're like, yeah, you know, you're talking about Jesus loving me personally, aren't you? I'm like, yep. So like, God knows me. I'm like, yes. Oh, right. So we're going to evangelize the people that are already coming. And these are great people that have a sense of religion and have been engaged in the sacraments all their life, right? And their commitment to the church is beautiful, but they haven't yet had this personal encounter with Jesus. And when that happens, like you had at World Youth Day, it changes your whole experience, right? When you come to Mass, everything is different about it now because you know Jesus, and so you know when you come to the altar who it is that you're encountering. Right? If you don't know Jesus and you don't have that personal relationship, you don't know the person that you're receiving at the altar. So we've got to start there. When we talk about encounter with Jesus, I'll just make a little clarification here, and Pope Francis talks about inviting everyone to that. I've encountered lots of people in my life, and it hasn't changed my life. That's a picture of Peter Beattie. He was a Premier of Queensland a while back. I shook his hand. He left his hat on a table, and I was about 22, so I took the opportunity to put his hat on. I got a picture with his hat on. This was before smartphones, so I had to do it with an old school phone, you know. So I've had an encounter with Peter Beattie. Didn't change my life, all right? I've ridden 260 kilometres with Robbie McEwen. That's the fellow in the yellow and green there. He was a green jersey wearer at the Tour de France. He's like a big wig in cycling. He commentates for the Tour. Ridden with him for a whole day, you know, Toowoomba to the Gold Coast to Toowoomba. Didn't change my life, right? Good fun, interesting fella. Didn't change my life. I met this one in 2004, and I married her in 2010. Completely changes my life and keeps on changing my life. My encounter with her has transformed everything, right? My relationship with her means that I can be here today. It means that I have 5 children. It changes the car I drive. It changes the house that I live in. It changes where I live in the world. It changes the songs that I listen to in the car. You know, Baby Shark, like seriously. And all that, you know, they're getting a little bit older now, so we've moved to Taylor Swift and Dua Lipa, but it changes everything, right? And so when the Pope and when the Church is talking about encountering Jesus, it's not talking about this kind of handshake business, g'day Jesus, nice to meet you, and then we get on with our lives. We're talking about the kind of encounter that I'm talking about with my wife Leonie there, that not only does it start something new in you, you know, when you first meet someone that you fall in love with, it's like this new energy comes about you, and you can stay up till 2 a.m. and you can wake up at 5 and have breakfast, you know, because you're just passionate, right? This is amazing. And it just keeps on transforming your life. And so when we have that kind of encounter with Jesus, it transforms everything about our experience of God and the world. And we see the whole world through the eyes of Christ. It just brings everything to life. It's like everything that's true, good and beautiful begins to pop in a way that it didn't, because Christ is in us and we're seeing the world through the Holy Spirit, and we're seeing each other through that lens of God's presence. So number 2, we're going to reorient everything the parish does to focus intentionally on mission. So focus on mission. How is everything that's going on in your parish or community helping others encounter Jesus? Now, if you're a priest or an archbishop, something that I recommend you consider doing is, you know, find one of the other priests in a parish nearby, and then find a family that you might know well enough to pretend like you're their uncle, right, or grandfather, as it might be. Take off your clerical gear and just dress like you're an uncle or a grandfather, and sit with the family for a day at Mass. Okay? And the reason that's helpful for clergy is because the experience of sitting down next to a family with primary school aged children and mum and dad is fundamentally different in every way, shape or form than it is to being the person on the sanctuary. And when you sit with a family, all of a sudden you start to see the experience of the Mass and the liturgy in a completely different way. And you start to see that, you know, most primary school children are going to find it really hard to survive through Mass, sitting between 2 pews for like an hour, right? That's not because they're bad kids, right? And it's not because their parents aren't faithful. It's just because what we're doing for them is not pitched at a level that they're at, you know. And so having that experience of sitting with a family can be really transformative in your ministry. The other thing that transforms as well is if you have a non-Catholic friend that you can bring to Mass and they come along, you start to see everything differently. You know, you walk into church and you think, gee, that sign hasn't been replaced for like 25 years. Got a bit of rust in the corner and the paint's coming down on the top side. And you notice it because a new person's there. And then you walk into the foyer and you think, gee, the floor hasn't been cleaned in here for like a fair while. Anyone had this experience, you know? And then you're looking at the paths and they're sort of like they haven't been pressure cleaned for 20 years and they're all kind of brown or sort of mouldy. And then you get into the church and you think, gee, it needs a good paint. You know, and then the music starts and you're like, and so you're thinking, have I done enough kind of prepping for this person so that they can look past all these things and get to the miracle that's going to happen at the end? You know, are they even going to see it? You know, can you see what I'm saying? And so when you start to think about what we're doing from the position of an outsider, all of a sudden you realise that these things matter. Right? And they don't matter because they change the objective power of grace in the Eucharist. No, they don't. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm not in any way advocating for, you know, changing Mass or being flippant with it. What I am saying is that if this is the strongest and most intimate encounter with God that we can have as Catholics, then everything around it should lead us to that moment of encounter. Right? If you're going to meet the Queen, you don't expect to have like a dirty garden and an unclean path and, you know, an old sign and everything's cold and music that's half-baked and then, you know, oh, g'day Queen, or I should say King now, I'm showing my age. We don't, right? And so the whole atmosphere of the parish is either helping orient someone towards the profound encounter with Jesus, or else it's saying what we're doing here is not actually that important. You see that? And so when we do things at a mediocre level and we don't take them seriously and everything's a bit sort of half-baked, really what we're saying to everyone is what we're doing is not important. And that's the total opposite to what's going on, okay? So, mission-oriented parish. How are we reaching the people in our streets? What are we doing so that if a new person comes in, they feel welcome, they feel connected, they find community? What are we doing to make a difference in the needs of the parish? What are the needs of the parish? So we're going to be thinking about the people who are not there. Someone once says the church is the only institution that exists for its non-members. Exists for its non-members. So let's start thinking about those who aren't in our pews, because the Pope is asking us, our Archbishop's asking us to be 100% mission-oriented. If something you're doing is not helping you towards your mission, then just stop it. Okay? Now, you have to bring people on a journey with that, because if you just stop it without sort of taking people on the journey of what mission is, you'll have a mutiny, right? We've had a few of those in Brisbane. But we've got to get people to understand what the mission is, what their why is, why the church exists, what its mission here is on earth, and then why we're then going to make changes to what we're doing to reorient the parish to mission. So this is experience the Mass through the eyes of a new person. Reorient the experience to the people who aren't there. Now that doesn't mean changing the language. It doesn't mean we don't stop talking about, you know, consecration and Eucharist and all that. But we're thinking about how do we make this experience lead people to that encounter. The last thing, and this might sound weird, right? But it's just keeping the main thing the main thing. If you're Catholic and you spend any time online, sometimes it just makes me want to cry, like the things that you see on Catholic pages, because they're obsessed with things like the reception of communion, you know, or whether a song fits a liturgical form, or you know, what the church's position on some political thing should be. It's endless distraction from the mission. Have you noticed that? Is that just me? You know, now it's good to have, you know, good, robust discussions about things like liturgy and whatever. But when we fixate on our ideological preferences in liturgy instead of reaching the person out in the house next to the parish, we've forgotten our mission. You know, we're back to the Terminator. What is your mission? I'm like, you must have communion like this. You know, you must sing this song in the Mass. You know, you must use this instrument. You know, What is your mission? Go and make disciples. How is your parish making disciples? It's not doing it by faffing around with issues that are not important. Right? And it's like we just fixate on the wrong things, and sometimes I've seen the most passion from some clergy about the fact that there was too many hosts in the tabernacle before Mass, and we should really have hosts from the Mass that's celebrated there. Liturgically, that's correct, but Father, I'd love to see the same passion about the people outside that aren't in the church. Right? What is our mission? Okay, yeah, sure, get liturgical norms right, follow the rubrics, right? But our passion is mission, right? Mission, mission, mission. Go make disciples. Don't get fixated in conversations that are not helping us with our mission. Is that all right? So keep the main thing the main thing. Are the things we are talking about and investing in completely mission focused? And if you're in a pastoral council or a finance council, ask yourself that question. Is this mission focused? Every agenda item, how is this contributing to the mission? Every liturgical discussion, how is this contributing to the mission? Is it contributing, yes or no? Is the gospel being proclaimed? Are people encountering Jesus? Are we being sidetracked again? And I think for many of us, I think it's fair to say our church has been sidetracked for a long time, and our Pope and our Archbishop has been trying to pull us back onto mission, back onto being a missional parish. At times, our faithfulness to European culture of the Middle Ages with relationship to music, architecture, language can trump faithfulness to Christ and his mission to make disciples of all nations. Now that's a provocative statement. The reason I say that is sometimes we get more obsessed about liturgical style or the style of a building than we do about whether or not someone encounters Jesus. And when we do that, we've forgotten the church. Jesus says, my church is not of this earth, right? And so when we fixate on things of this earth and we fixate on style rather than content, we just miss the mission, right? The content is Christ and him crucified. The content is for you to encounter Jesus through the grace of baptism, through receiving Christ's body, blood, soul and divinity in the Eucharist, being confirmed by the power of the Holy Spirit and set on mission, right? The content is that your life can change and you can find salvation through the power of God. The content is that the Catholic Church is the hope of the world, right? It's the hope of the world. So let's not get caught up on whether or not we're aligned enough with a particular style, okay? Because the style is not the tradition, okay? The style will be different anywhere you are in the world. It will have different languages, different customs, different buildings. The Catholic tradition is not about style, it's about the gospel, and it's the gospel, not the style, that changes lives. So stay in tune. I read a book recently and it talked about the fact that the tradition of the church is a beautiful melody, right? It's a beautiful song. If you imagine an orchestra, playing a beautiful classic Mozart piece. Oh, I'm going the wrong way here. The church has a melody, right? But it's a melody of faith, hope and love, of joy, peace, patience, gentleness, self-control. They're the fruit of the Spirit. It's a melody of repentance, of forgiveness, of healing, of redemption, of mercy, of compassion. That's the song, right, that the church sings. But sometimes the players are out of tune. And so you got, the Pope or your Bishop playing the tune on the violin, right, the lead violin, and some of us are playing a completely different song with a double bass and it's sounding pretty horrid, right? Yeah? And it's a good metaphor to even unpack the whole history of the church. There's people who like to say, oh, well, the church has done some horrible things in history, yeah? And you're like, yeah, we know, they're playing out of tune. They're playing out of tune. Whenever the church doesn't look like, sound like and feel like Jesus, whenever it's not full of faith, hope and love, it is out of tune, right? So what we've got to do is keep coming back to this question, wherever we are in our parish, are we playing in tune? Are we in tune to the mission? Are we in tune to the values of the church? Faith, hope and love. When people come into our community, are they experiencing the power of God? Are we in tune? The missional parish stays in tune. Thanks everybody for listening to me get a little bit fired up. It's a topic I'm very deeply passionate about. And just as I close, I would say, I came into the church as someone who's always been involved in church, primarily intellectually, because the theology, the philosophy and the history of our church is incredibly beautiful. It is so robust, it is so rich. The Catholic Church is the one church that has the potential to bring all of the others to itself. We have the meta structures for unity in the church, in the world. We have the most beautiful theology. The sacramental theology of the church is incredible. Our theology on all 7 sacraments and even the role of the church. It's incredible what we have, right? But I'm passionate about this because what I see is often parishes that are not in tune with our theology, not in tune with our mission, not in tune with our philosophy. This great hope, truth, beauty and goodness that we have is not being shared in a way that's compelling and life-changing. And so what I'd love to see with all my heart is parishes that come alive, that are as beautiful as our theology, that are as beautiful as our mission, that are as attractive as Jesus Christ. So as I finish, I pray that you're able in your local context to take some of this and see your local parish become a missionary parish. Thank you.